Well, good morning, good day. Welcome to you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you here on retreat. Retreat is such a special and unique time for us to come together. And so I hope you really take the time this weekend to honor this, to put the phones down and to put your life down and to be here fully and completely. And so the power of the retreat and how much you receive is dependent upon you, how open you are and how available you are to the teachings and how available you are to God and to life. And so this retreat, of course, is about spiritual power, but like, we have to ask ourselves, well, what does that mean? And a big part of our spiritual power is our attention. And so I hope you join me in being here fully and on the breaks continuing to sit with the questions and to be with yourself and to really take some big steps away from life and just being all the way here with your presence. Now, of course, I know it's 2024 and many of us sign up for these retreats, and we also have children and families and jobs, and uh, there's a lot of people, almost a quarter of the people on the retreat are at, at work right now, and and so I know that happens too, and so we just do our best. We do our best, whatever that is. And so please know that there's recordings. And if ever you notice that I start teaching and the recording button isn't on, then send me a message in the chat, raise your hand, and to make sure I get that on. So let's talk about the recordings just for a moment. For some people, that's frightening that this is all being recorded, but the way it works is whoever is speaking on the video feed here, well, that one is being recorded. So it's going to be mostly me, but then there'll be times when you ask questions and that will be recorded and the recordings will be shared with everyone here on retreat. Now I am beginning to do something new where I'm going to start selling these retreats for other people to view in the future. So this last retreat we did on the chakras was really popular, and a lot of people who didn't join reached out and said, hey, can I get a copy of those recordings? Can I buy them, Craig? And so I said, okay, like I need to make these available, for sale at a later date. And, that's an idea that I have, and it might take me a week and it might take me 3 years, to pull that off. But one day, in theory, these recordings will be available for others as well. Now, if you don't want to be recorded, then you can write that in the chat before you raise your hand and ask your question, and I can turn off the record button and then turn it back on when you're done with your question, and so we can do that. You can also turn off your video and ask me a question, and you can also just put your question in the chat. So there's a number of ways not to be recorded if you're nervous about that. I've said this often that back in the days of CDs, I'm on a lot of recordings, like my voice as a student with my teacher, Ajashanti, and people used to come up to me and, say, hey, you're that guy with that voice, on the recordings. Thank you so much for asking that question. I had that question also. And so I encourage you not to be shy and to see that we all have the same human mind. We all have the same range of human emotions. We all have the same struggles here on planet Earth. And so it can be a gift for you to humbly ask your question and interact with the teacher or share your experience. It can be very supportive for others on the path. So keep that in mind. We don't all have to be so self-conscious, but if something big comes up and you're going through something real traumatic and you don't want that recorded, that's okay too. Just let me know. Just let me know. Okay, so I think That's all the details. But the way I'll work with the recordings is, I'll record them and then I'll do my best on the breaks if there's time to get them uploaded. And then normally I have the recordings ready from the previous session in the next session. And so if you miss one because you're at work, normally the recording will be there. But look, I'm just going to do my best. And, sometimes I don't get to them till the, 2 weeks after the retreat, but I'll do my best to keep uploading them. Okay. That being said, it's Mercury in retrograde. Sometimes there's technological errors and I screw something up. So just keep that in mind. That happens. Things happen. Okay. What other things do I have to go over here before we get started? Okay, so here's a big one. On this retreat, we're going to be speaking about the silly and bizarre ways human beings express their power. And so I'm going to be poking a lot of fun at the way humans are. And I might poke fun at the things that I do, the things that my family does, the things that different cultures do, so the things that geopolitical leaders do. And please, keep this in mind. I am not a politically correct individual. Okay. It's just not my nature. I don't believe in political correctness. I believe that human beings are all crazy. They're all silly. They're all kind of quirky and weird and bizarre and strange. And so please, we're not here to be offended. We are actually here to awaken out of our guarded egoic reality and to begin to explore spiritual power. Spiritual power. But for us to step into this recognition of our absolute divinity, we have to shed the layers of the costume that we're wearing. And so we have to be willing to look at our costume or our cultural beliefs and to be able to smile at them, to laugh at them, just to see that, okay, these are just things that are what the Buddha called our conditioning from our culture. Conditioning. And conditioning isn't the truth. Conditioning is just something that humans do. There's something in dogs that conditions them to be really excited to pee on the same spot that other dogs peed on, and that's, to me, that's funny and that's silly. But there's also, there's something in humans, like right now, humans are fighting over who gets to use which bathrooms, and it's just that's silly and it's funny and it's bizarre, Now, some people get really carried away with that and have their whole identity around which bathroom they get to use, but again, I don't care. It's just silly things that human beings do. And so if you're sensitive, you might find that your feelings get hurt on this retreat, your feelings get hurt from this teacher. And I'm not here, I'm going to say something rough here. I'm not here to be concerned about your feelings. I'm here to be concerned about you realizing that you are a Buddha, that you are a goddess, that you are this divine awakening being who lives in a world that is much greater than the small, limited world of egoic identity. Okay, so just keep this in mind, that on this retreat, we're going to look at how humans are, in one sense, really silly in regards to power, and also incredibly violent and destructive in regards to power, and everything in between. Everything. We're going to look at power from the whole range of violence at the world level, these world wars that everyone's ready to jump into, down to, how I get a little bit offended because somebody didn't honor my feelings or my trauma or my projections or whatever it is. Whatever it is. Ultimately, my question to you is, do you know that you are God? That you are the entirety of life? Well, that's a much different kind of power. When you know you are the entirety of life, you're not concerned about the little things. You're not concerned. Now, you may have a sensitivity toward the little things. You may have a compassion towards the little things. You may have an eloquence toward the little things. But in this moment, I'm inviting us to be liberated. Liberated from the ways that cultural and conditioned power structures influence and veil our soul. And veil our soul. And that's what a big part of this retreat is going to be about, freeing ourselves from these influences, freeing ourselves from these conditionings, and just even being able to ask, like, is this thing that I expect, is this thing that I expect, is it the truth? Is it the highest truth? Now, I have all these silly expectations in life. Like, I live in the country, I live in a small town, and I expect when I'm driving down the road for there to be no traffic. I expect there to be lots of space in between the cars. I expect when I go to the grocery store that there is no line. There's no line. But since COVID, a lot of people have moved to my little mountain town, and it's gotten much, much bigger. And my expectations are being challenged. And so I can look at that and I can smile. I can also be grumpy and choose to suffer to some degree. But at some point, I have to let go if I want to be free. Now, freedom, of course, is a quality of spiritual empowerment. Or I can sit and live in the past and wish my town was half or a quarter of the size that it used to be, and be angry every time I see a license plate from the neighboring tribe of Texas, of Texas, or the further neighboring tribe of California. And so I could be angry about this, and I can have violent thoughts towards these individuals, or I can smile a little bit and admit and acknowledge I actually married into California. My wife, she's from California, and she's also, a part of, a couple of different tribes than me. She's Irish like me, but she's also Hawaiian and Chinese, and she has Filipino brothers and, and Filipino cousins, and, when they all get together, it's, my wife's identity can be like a whole range of things. So sometimes she can just be, Irish, and now she's Catholic. She could be Irish Catholic. When she's with the Hawaiians, it's like, oh my Lord, like, what's going on here with all these Hawaiians? Like, what are they doing? And then somehow when the Filipinos come online in the family, then they all start looking Samoan, and I have no idea how that works. And then sometimes there's ones that look, more Chinese and more Asian. It's like, okay, we're feeling that energy, in the family. And so, of course, we're going to smile and include and let go of our expectations from a place of compassion. From a place of compassion. Now, there's been times in my family, like my, say, Irish European family, where I've had family members speak about, other family members who are in interracial marriages. And I'm like, the hell year is it? Is this like 1950? We're talking about interracial marriages. Like what the hell kind of thing is that? And playing little power games that somehow, people in the family are upsetting the authority of, the whatever, the Irish Catholic dominant race of the family tribe. And so you see things get silly. Things get silly with power. And I've been on many retreats where I spoke about this last week, where there's been tears about people and where they sit and someone taking their seat. And so these are little power games that we play where we go and we mark our territory, where we put down our clothes, or we put our books there, we put our special meditation cushion there, and you see people, someone moves your cushion and, like, why are they messing with me? They're not honoring me. And so all these ways, our human ego psychology gets offended. And so if you start to look at your life through this lens of power, you start to see that the ego is made up of countless power games. Countless power games. That it's always trying to assert itself or dominate or claim a little piece of territory here or there on the spiritual path. And, it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. Now, in the teachings of this lineage and the teachings of Sri Aurobindo, Aurobindo has spoken a lot about humans evolving out of animal nature. And, this is a hard thing because we are animals. We are animals. But if our world is going to change, we have to evolve out of animal nature and animal power structures and animal unconscious power games, and like I have a little dog and he's always excited to guard his property, and I want you to hear what I said, his property. And it's like, well, is it his property? Is it my property? Or is it God's property? And these are the questions we're going to be looking at here on the spiritual path. Like, am I aligning unconsciously with my animal nature? Or am I aligning unconsciously with my tribal nature and being offended? Am I aligning with some type of, political nature and being offended? Or some kind of woke identity and being offended? Or am I aligning with my humility and realizing that it's all God and this is an evolutionary world and it's a world of growth? And in this world of growth and in this evolutionary world where we are on this confusing path of outgrowing our animal nature, and then, let's push the limits of that, and then growing into our human nature. And then the invitation here is to outgrow our human nature and to grow into divine nature. And in our divine nature, we can forgive, like Christ did, the very people who not only are offending us, but perhaps even being violent towards us. Of course, it's a great form of power, an immense form of power, to be able to forgive those who have deeply hurt us, who've deeply hurt us. And so please just know that on this retreat, I want you to pay a special attention to how your ego holds itself, how it maintains its structure. And the ego, it maintains a false structure of solidity through building up psychological walls, psychological defenses, psychological gifts. Like in our culture, we tend to value people who are successful in business, people who are well liked on social media. We tend to value people who, are famous and this and that. And again, like these are all just ego games. But here we're not on this path to play ego games. We are here to end ego games. We are here to step into our divine truth. Our divine truth. But this is a very difficult thing here on planet Earth, because we have incarnated into these bodies which can be harmed, which can be hurt, bodies which will get sick and die. We have a psychological nature, again, which can be harmed and wounded and hurt and diminished and overwhelmed. And so our ego is always on overdrive, trying to protect itself. And yet we are these angelic beings who have come here to planet Earth to help in the awakening of humanity and the transformation of the consciousness of humanity and, in fact, of all of life. And so this is a very confusing thing we find ourselves in as this awakening being who's excited to come to planet Earth to share in the light. And then we have an animal body that gets scared sometimes of being beat up or being made fun of or being fired at work. I was speaking to someone, I know who, yesterday, who was, had some thoughts about being fired. And like my question always is like, well, who is the doer here on planet Earth? Is God the doer? Is God the sustainer? Is God the provider? Or are you the doer? Is your boss the doer? Is your boss the provider? Like his mother and father, are they the provider? Like, who are the providers? Is it God? Or is it other humans? And they're confused, crazy, egoic natures. Excuse me. And so we're really going to be looking at these questions. And this retreat is going to be heavy in the realm of inquiry. Heavy in the realm of inquiry. Like often on these retreats, we're heavy in the realm of meditation. And if you notice, like I notice, there's a transmission that's happening now. And so if you plug into the transmission, you will feel it here the same way as if we were meditating, but we might be doing more investigating on this spiritual path, on this spiritual retreat, because we need to be able to unhook from all these structures of ego. We need to be able to unhook from them. We need to be able to help them to dissolve or diminish. We need to be able to question them so that they do not have power over us, so they do not veil our divinity. Because at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, all of you, if you feel into your absolute nature is perfect and divine and holy right now. Right now. But in your human nature that veils this divinity, you might find your human nature is really loud and obnoxious and confused, or sometimes it's really busy. Sometimes our human nature is just busy bouncing a little baby on our knee or at our lap, or might be busy, attending to, your boss's needs or your wife or your children's needs or your own emotional needs or your confused, addicted needs or whatever it is. And so, again, we're going to investigate all this. And I'm really happy to have you all here, to have you all here. And so, I could go on and on about all the silly ways power games and ego psychology interact. But I'm just going to share just one more because this is kind of fun. And I shared this at meditation the other night, but the other morning we had a big cat in my neighborhood and a cat in Colorado, for talking about it, is really a lion. So the other day in my neighborhood, we had a lion. The lion was actually walking on the river trail, and one of the neighbors, saw the lion, and the lion saw the neighbor, and the neighbor's like, oh shit, like there's a lion right here in front of me. But the lion took off and it ran up the trail and, it ran up the hillside and it ran by, right by my house. And so then later in the night, so I heard this story, from one of my neighbors. And then later in the night, I took my two little munchkins, my two little puffballs outside for a walk and in the backyard. And over in the bushes, was a large animal that was making a distress call to me. And cats do this, lions do this. They hide out in the bushes, they make a distress call to try to get you to come over there, and then they pounce on you. Now, he was probably trying to get my two little puppies, to go over there. He probably didn't want to mess with me, but he could mess with me. He could, he could eat me up. And a couple of years ago, one of my neighbors did get eaten by a cat. And one of my best friends actually shot that cat. And so you see, there's all these ways that power can manifest here on planet Earth. And so, like, in my consciousness, like my ego has been on a heightened state of alert at nighttime when I take my little puppies out at night, and in the morning, that's normally when the cats are active. It's less likely the cat will be running around in my yard in the middle of the day. But, and I've had thoughts in my head, of how to manage the situation. And so far it's been, I'm just going to be out there at all times when I take the dogs out. And I'm out there with really bright, like ridiculously bright flashlights. These new flashlights that they sell that, can blind you if you look into the lens of the light. So I'm out there with these big flashlights shining around, making sure there's not a lion in my yard ready to eat my little friends. And for those in the Sangha, that, earlier in the year, I had a big bear in the yard that came and ate my daughter's guinea pigs. And so my ego has these thoughts around danger. And these are normal thoughts. They're healthy thoughts given where I live. For those of you who live in cities, it might seem like extreme thoughts or bizarre thoughts, but I'll take it to the next level. My ego says, well, I should be out in the yard, with my rifle, with my rifle when I'm taking the dogs out. But then I'm doing the math in my head, like, we're really going to be out there with a rifle in my yard because I still live in town. I still live in town. It's like, am I really going to do that? And it's like, no, I'm just going to be out there with a flashlight and we'll be out there quickly. And then, I'll hurry and get the dogs back in the house. And so there's times when we really need to use our power from just a place of egoic practicality. Like there's times at work when you need to assert your power so you can get a raise, or there's times in life when you need to assert your power and speak your truth. Speak your truth. Because someone's picking on you or someone's bullying you, or just because something needs to be straightened out. Because something needs to be straightened out. Like I have I have a good friend, and he's part of um, the Navajo Nation, here in Southwest Colorado. And, he laughs at, like all the white people who are trying to give him new names for himself. And so, it started off by not calling him Navajo or Dene. It started off by calling him an Indian. And then it went to, okay, he's a Native American. And now, it's like we have to call him an indigenous person, and so, like we do jujitsu together, and, he's, he's always laughing, at us, and he's saying, you must call me an indigenous person, and he like butchers it because, he just laughs at just the, in a sense, like the white man's play with words. The white man's play with words, he's like, I don't need anyone to call me an indigenous person. He's like, you just call me Dodge. Just call me Dodge. And I'm a Ute Indian, Indian. And so see, he's owning it. He's owning it. He's saying, I'm an Indian, a Ute Indian. He plays with his power. He's not going to play this game, political correctness of, he's a Native American and then he's an indigenous person. He's just like, look, I'm a Ute. I'm a Ute. Actually, he's not a Ute. He's a Navajo. He's a Dene. And then he even has fun with it. He has fun. He's like, am I Navajo or am I Dene? And then I have other friends who are Utes, and they have fun with their language as well. And so, there's times when we express our truth, and there's times when we can express our truth with seriousness, and there's times when we can express our truth with lightheartedness and humor. And so there's all kinds of ways that we play with power. But there's all kinds of ways that we can get lost with power and power dynamics. I can't tell you how many marriages I've seen fall apart because of power struggles within a couple. Power struggles. People fighting over who puts the kids to bed and who does the dishes, or who makes more money, and, who, family we're going to spend Christmas with. And so ultimately, we see that when we step back and look at our lives from a place of impersonalness, we see that human beings are so plugged into power. So plugged into power. And most of us are plugged into power in deeply unconscious ways. Deeply unconscious ways. And so I'm going to invite us all right now to close our eyes. And just to begin this retreat by asking this question. In what ways am I plugged into unconscious power games? What are my unconscious power games, power struggles, power issues? And so I'm going to invite you to step into your higher consciousness. I'm going to invite you to step into this sense of being awake and aware. And so for some of you, if your eyes open, it'll be helpful to close your eyes and just meditatively enter this space of inquiry. And we're standing, we're claiming, we're choosing to step into our highest sense of self. And from place which is awake and aware, timeless and eternal, can you look at your humanity? And I'm going to invite us to start this retreat by looking at our humanity and smiling, smiling, and acknowledging, boy, this is a silly setup. It's a silly setup. If you feel into your divine nature and you acknowledge you are this bright light, like you are literally light. Your consciousness is light, literally. And so, can you feel this? That your consciousness is radiant, is spacious, is brilliant, is awake and aware. And just as your consciousness is awake and aware to the sound of my voice, I'm going to invite us to be awake and aware of the setup that we're in, where we are a divine being, but we are literally riding around in a body that's made up of all kinds of ancestral karma. It has all that kind of tribal thinking. It has moralistic thinking. It has conditioning from your education. It has conditioning from whatever class you grew up in. Has conditioning from whether you live in the country or you live in the city. And your city might have conditioning, like San Francisco has much different conditioning than New York City, has a different conditioning than Dubai, different conditioning than Bangkok. There's all this different conditioning we have. Whatever country we live in has conditioning. And can we look at these realms of conditioning and smile a little bit? This is a spiritual power to be able to smile at your human life and human experience, your human conditioning. It's a spiritual power to not take life so seriously. You know, whether you're Danish or Swede or a big, loud American, you know, you're a proper British, you know, if you're a hillbilly from Kentucky like me, or a fiery Hawaiian like my wife, or whatever it is, can we smile? Can we smile at the vehicle that we find ourselves in? Can we smile a little bit? Can we smile? Can we smile at our family's conditioning and the power games, the power struggles, the power beliefs? My mother was given this conditioning that women aren't supposed to drive. They're not allowed to go to college. They are allowed to be teachers or nurses or mothers. That's what my mother's conditioning was. And so, you know, if you have any of that, or there's any of that floating around in the culture, can we smile at that? Can we see through the conditioning? Because sometimes the power games really limit us. Other times, you know, they give us a great privilege. You know, if we have a different type of power game or power conditioning. And so giving ourselves just to see and to begin to witness the way power manifests in our life, in our psyche. Some of us have ideas that are very disempowering, like I'm not lovable, or I will never heal, I will never awaken. And sometimes we have silly ideas about awakening, like you have to be born in Tibet. And I ran into that on the spiritual path, that you can't be awake unless you're born in Tibet or India. And so can we smile? Can we see through? And there's some power issues that we're really going to need to grieve. Because some of us have been really abused by other people's power, or we've taken on beliefs, again, that are very disempowering, and we need to grieve those and let them go. Like, I'm not lovable. I can't wake up. God doesn't love me. So we're breathing and we're feeling, and we're beginning to meditatively investigate our issues with power. For some of us in the Sangha, it's, we came in with I'll call it a non-dominant sexual orientation. And, the culture projected onto us, we projected on the culture that we're not allowed to be here. We're not allowed to be who we are. We have to hide ourselves. And so really looking and viewing and investigating the ways power has been asserted on us, or we've asserted it on others, or unconscious movements of power where we cultural influences where it feels like we're not allowed to be who we are. For some of us, we're spiritual beings, and we have this idea that we don't think we're allowed to be spiritual in the worldly world. In the worldly world. And then that's one too, where our ego holds on to this belief that this is a worldly world. It's not a divine world. It's an earthly world ruled by people's egos. And if you believe in that thought, be radically disempowering. Whereas I'm going to say something, I'm going to invite you to see if you resonate with this, but do you resonate with this truth that this is God's world? God's world. That God is the boss of creation, not Donald Trump, not Vladimir Putin, not Mr. Kim from North Korea, not Joe Biden, not our father, our mother. It's not their world. It's God's world. It's God's world. And I want you to notice how you feel disempowered when you think that Mr. Putin is in charge of the world, or Mr. Trump, or Mr. Biden, or Mr. Macron or whoever it is. Like, what does it feel like when we think that politicians rule the world? Just to notice how it limits your experience versus together as we open and we begin to acknowledge this is actually God's world. And God is love. God is light. God is mercy. God is forgiveness. God is absolute. God is evolution. And so as we begin to open together and step into the realm of God's authority and God's power, you might notice two things that you begin to merge into God's light, God's radiance, God's power. You might also notice in a human way that it's confusing, that God is all powerful and all loving. And at the same time, God allows there to be cancer. God allows there to be abuse. And God allows there to be war. And so from a place of humility, we can admit that God is great and that we don't understand God's will. Or from a place of ego, we can say God is wrong and God is unfair. And I don't like this God. I don't like this God who's supposed to be all love and also creates cancer. And so as you see on this spiritual path, the thoughts that you believe can empower you, or the thoughts you can believe can limit you, or create some type of resistant response, like I'm a rebel and I need to fight against God. Be angry at God, resist God for creating this evolutionary world that I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm just going to align with my ego and just fight for my place in the world. And that's what most people choose. And so I'm going to invite us to begin to come to see that you grow in faith through aligning with God, the laws of God. You grow in strength and power through aligning with God. And you lose your power and literally give your power away through arguing with God. And so we're breathing, we're feeling, we're opening. And we're seeing the ways that we have unconsciously aligned with egoic power, egoic worldviews, conditioned worldviews, tribal worldviews, biased worldviews, confused worldviews. And so we're inviting our unconsciousness to come forward into the light. And so this beginning inquiry, this beginning meditation might be a little messy. It might be a little distorted, like a bizarre dream. We're inviting the unconscious to come forward into the light, to be cleared, to be healed, to be uplifted, to be forgiven, to be released. So that this greater truth can come online. So that this greater authority can shine through you and become manifest. So we're breathing, we're feeling, we're opening, and inviting the unconscious to come forward. All the ways we've been hurt, or bullied, or violated. We're seeing them from this perspective of light, from this perspective of the timeless, eternal. And if you have been hurt, I'm sure you have, here on planet Earth, where do you identify? How do you identify with that hurt? Do you identify with the body who has been hurt and repeat the story in your mind? Or do you identify as the eternal one, acknowledging from a place of compassion, yes, this body has been hurt, this mind has been hurt, the psyche has been hurt, but I am a Buddha, I'm a bright light. And this light is indefiable, unharmable, indestructible. And I have so much light, I'm going to shine it into my wound, into my body, flooding my body with light, flooding my body with love, bringing my body into the present moment to release, to let go, to heal, to soften, to wake up, to be restored, to be renewed. So, of course, we're choosing to stand in the higher realms of our divinity and to shine light into our lower realms, flooding them with compassion, with kindness. If there's tears that need to flow, we allow those tears to flow and wash over our heart. Breathing, feeling, opening. Inviting this body to heal, to wake up. Of course, these are great spiritual superpowers, the ability to choose to wake up, ability to shine the light into the darkness, ability to choose to face the unconscious, to choose to forgive, to let go of the past. And so as we continue to play with this meditative inquiry, I'm going to invite us to stand in a place of spiritual power and authority, a place of great strength, and to look at your life and how you have asserted power over others in unconscious ways, in hurtful ways. And maybe you see that you were the older brother or older sister and played power games with the little ones. Maybe you played power games with mom or dad. Maybe you played power games with sister or brother. Maybe you did harmful things or betrayed lovers or partners or husbands or wives. You were untruthful. You put your interest first. Or you lied or cheated to get your way or your needs met. So breathing, feeling, opening, choosing the spiritual superpower of truth, allowing the truth to shine its brilliant healing light, freeing light into the places of darkness, to places in our soul that have been confused, places within our humanity that have been scared and acted out of fear, and maybe we bullied. Maybe we lashed out. Maybe we were even violent or abusive. Maybe we played little subtle games where we took a truth and subtly twisted it. Subtly twisted it so that we could get our way in life. And so giving ourselves permission to look and to smile at this sneaky, egoic computer that we are all given. The sneaky, egoic computer, just like the lion was trying to manipulate me and my puppies to come over and take a closer look. So how are the ways our ego has been sneaky? It's been sneaky. Manipulative. And we can even look at the ways that our ego has lied to itself to have its desires met, to have its unconscious needs met. The ways the ego has ignored the truth to satisfy lesser desires. And so we are breathing, we are feeling, we are opening. And inviting the light. Our spiritual superpower, inviting our light, the light, to shine into the darkness, to be liberated. to liberate, to heal. And so we'll take a moment here and invite the grace of God to more fully shine down into our life, to support, to uplift us on the spiritual path. For those of us who have very heavy and dense egos, we're calling upon the divine to come more fully into us, to awaken a great faith, a great strength, to ignite a holy fire within us, a holy, radiant fire, a fire which burns through the central channel, clearing out confusion and darkness, burning up veils, burning up anything that veils our light, our divinity. So the more you choose to say yes to this light, yes to the divine waking up in you and as you, this is how we become empowered on the spiritual path. And the more you turn away from the light and align with your egoic identity and all its thoughts and beliefs and tribal thinking and conditioning, thoughts and feelings of unworthiness, and internalize your parents' voice within you, identify and align with that, you diminish your light, you diminish your power. And so we're saying, Lord God, give me the strength to choose you, to have faith in you, to have faith that in God all things are possible, to have faith that I am your child, to have faith that I am divine, to come to know, to experience your divinity, waking up to your divinity. And so this is our prayer. This is our invitation. This is our invocation. God, give us the strength to stand in the truth, to stand in the light, to embody this radiance, the space of our mind, the space of our heart, the space of our heart, throughout the totality of our being. And so gently opening our eyes. And I welcome you here on retreat. And so I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the beginning, but it'd be helpful if you had a notebook. You had a little something that you could write on, if you had a little journal. And so I'm going to give us the main inquiry question for this retreat. And I'm going to invite you to write it down. And I'm going to invite someone in the Sangha here to be the secretary, and just write the question down for me in the chat. But the main question for this retreat is, do you have faith that in God all things are possible? And so, could someone raise their hand for me and volunteer to be the secretary? Please. Please. Or I'm going to have to assign one. Okay, Johan. Thank you, Johan. Okay, so Johan, if you just write in the chat the main question, do you have faith that in God all things are possible? Oh, wait, Lauren's already doing it. Lauren's already doing it. Okay, Lauren, you're the secretary. Okay, do you have faith that in God all things are possible? And do you have faith? This will be the second question. That you are God. Do you have faith that you are a divine being? For some of us, if we look at that second question, do you have faith that you are God? You might be like, oh, I can't be God. God is God. And I understand that. So we can add to it. Do you have faith that you are a divine being? That you are a divine being. And then the next question is, or do you have faith that you are an egoic being? Do you believe that you are your egoic identity, your egoic structure, your egoic thoughts and emotions and conditioning? Or let's see if you can get all that. And so this is the primary question for the retreat. And so I'm going to invite you, like with your little notebook there, I'm just going to repeat the questions. And I want you just to take a couple minutes here and just write down your answers, like when your thoughts, your reflections. And so with inquiry, for those of you new to inquiry, I don't want to give a whole class on it just yet, but just I want you to reflect a little bit on these questions. So you can write a little something down. And when you write it down, it helps bring it out of the unconsciousness and into conscious light. Do you have faith that in God all things are possible? All things are possible. And for most of us here, it's like we want to awaken to our highest divinity. It's like, do you have faith in that? That I am here on planet Earth to awaken. And that, of course, this is possible because I'm a divine being, because I'm God. Or do you have faith in your egoic identity? Or do you have faith in your egoic identity? And of course, all of us here have faith in our egoic identity. And so to what degree? Like, do you have 100% faith in your egoic identity and see yourself as a completely separate, isolated animal being here on planet Earth? Like, do you have 100% faith in that, or do you have 10% faith in that and 90% faith that in God all things are possible? Or are you a wild one, have 100% faith in God? And so just take a couple minutes here, and I want you to reflect on the ways where you have faith in your egoic identity. Like for some of us, we have faith that God can show up on retreat. God can show up when there's a spiritual teacher in the room transmitting the light. But God certainly can't show up at my day job. No way, not there. Impossible. Impossible. God cannot show up in my relationships. Nope, just two egoic beings loving each other. God, for some people, God, they have faith that God can provide a parking place, but not any money. Any money. And for some people, their ego feels, well, let's say, financially strapped. And so the ego is screaming at God, demanding God provide them money without without doing any of the work. And so sometimes we have an ego that's flipped with power. It's like, oh no, my job is to make demands of God. And so I want you to just write down a couple of things, what comes up. What comes up. And we're looking at this question, David is writing it. It's like, hey, who is the doer here on planet Earth? Who's the doer? For non-dual people, we like this question. Who's the doer? Is God the doer? Am I God? Or is my ego the doer? Or other people's egos the doer? Who's in control of planet Earth? Okay. And so, with the way, different people teach inquiry and guide inquiry in different ways. I do it in a real loose way, kind of a stream of consciousness type of way. And so big picture on this retreat, we're going to be looking at these questions. And so on the breaks, I want you to stay with the question. Stay with the question. And I want you to have a little bit of fun with it. Have a little fun with it. And to be loose in your human consciousness. When we're loose in our human consciousness, it creates a fluidity and a flexibility for things to come forward, for things to be seen, for things to be released. But when we're really solid in our ego consciousness, we're really serious, we're really grumpy, it's hard for our divine parts to come online. It's hard for us to see our unconscious parts. It's a real funny thing when we're doing inquiry and someone is really serious and they have a furrowed brow and they're, looking at themselves, so intensely and in such a critical manner, and they can't see, oh, look, that's my ego trying to do inquiry. So I want inquiry to be done in this meditative fashion where we're open, where we're aligned with our highest self, and we're looking and we're investigating our human self. Our human self. Okay. And so if I just ask this basic question, do you believe that you are a divine being? Or do you believe that you are an egoic being? I'm going to invite you to share right now. Well, what comes forward? What comes forward? And so you can share in the chat, or you can raise your hand and courageously share yourself with the group. Yeah. Yeah. So Val writes both, and of course it's both. Yeah. Lauren writes, in some places I believe that I am divine, in other places I don't. Okay, good. So Lauren, I'm going to push you a little bit deeper. So in what ways can you claim your divinity, Lauren? In what ways can you claim your divinity? And in what ways do you don't claim your divinity? I like when Tyler writes, when it's convenient. So sometimes we do it when it's convenient, and other times we do it when it's safe. So I've done this thing so much of my life where, like, I've always had, a life where I've been deeply connected with, like I was deeply connected with my spiritual teacher. And he was my boss. He was like a second father to me. And I had this whole hidden life, for almost 20 years with me and my teacher. And I didn't share it much with the outward world. Now, I would share it sometimes, like Tyler said, when it's convenient. Like if I was teaching, if I was in a spiritual context, if I was on a retreat, I would share it. I would speak about it. But with most of my friends who were like mountain men kind of fellas, like I wouldn't speak very much about spirituality. I'd kind of hide it. Even with my family, I hid it. With my brothers, I hid it. They knew that Craig had this secret, but I hid my divinity. I hid my spiritual path. And even when I was growing up, like I wanted to be a priest, and I didn't say that to my friends. My friends were all skateboarders. They all wanted to be pro skateboarders. And they were really clear about who they were and what they wanted. And me, I didn't share it. I kind of hid it because, well, I knew they'd make fun of me. They'd make fun of me, but they'd catch me reading my spiritual books. They'd catch me with my secret. Okay. Blair writes, all is light, even in my dreams, that I am separate. All is light. Even my dream that I'm separate is made out of light. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like Blair, she's really in the fire. And when we're really in the fire of the divine, when we're really waking up, you just see, oh my God, this divinity is everywhere. And there's this great non-dual realization that occurs when we start to see it in the dream itself. We see it in the dream itself, that the dream too is made of light. How beautiful. Thank you, Blair. Yvonne writes, I feel like I'm both, but sometimes I fall into ego when I'm in pain. Oh my gosh. So thank you, Yvonne. This is a great truth here. It's kind of piggybacking what I was saying about safety. When we're in a safe environment, it's easy for us to let down our guard and to step into our spiritual sense of self. And throughout history, spiritual beings have always kind of hidden away. And one of the primary reasons why Gandhi isn't running for president, but instead, Mr. Trump, and I guess not Biden, he checked out, but Miss Harris is because spiritual beings have always hidden themselves away. Said, I don't want to engage with life. Because in life, there's pain and there's confusion and there's bullies. And so I'm going to hide my spirituality. I'm going to hide it. And our world will never change until ordinary folks like you, who are humble beings, who are divine beings, choose to stand in their spiritual power. And we all have the story of Jesus. When he stood in his power, we see, oh, what happened to him? It didn't end well for Jesus. Like, history wasn't ready for a divine ruler. Wasn't ready. And so now we have all these less than rulers, less than. But yeah, for a lot of us, like when we're in pain, our ego gets loud and our ego tends to rule the day. Rule the day. I like Johann, he took on the percentage rate. I like this. Right now, I feel like I'm 40% divine and 60% ego. Yeah. Yeah. And so Johann, let's check in at the end of the retreat and see how things are at the end of the retreat. So that's good to see. It's good to see. Val writes, a stumbling block. In the worlds, there is no right or wrong. My ego self doesn't understand what we are asked to have faith in. Oh yeah, so that's a stumbling block for Val. Yeah. Of course there's a right and a wrong. Of course there's a right and a wrong. Yeah. So from some fundamentalists, like non-dual teachings, there is no right and wrong. Like in an absolute sense, if we look out at the world, we're not going to say, this is right and this is wrong. We look out at the world in an absolute way and we say, this is divine perfection. It's absolutely beautiful, just as it is. And so I have this experience all the time where I'll climb a mountain, and I have all kinds of just little mountains just in my town or in my neighborhood. I climbed one on Wednesday where I just climbed up a mountain, and on the top of the mountain, you look out at the valley and I see the town of Durango below, and I see it's all perfect. It's all perfect, just as it is. You see the vast view in the distance are these white snow-capped mountains. So this is the absolute perspective. It's all good. It's all perfect, just as it is. Now, if I go down, the mountain, come down the trail, and I get on the river trail, and I see, a homeless guy who's passed out with a heroin needle in his vein. Like, that's not all good. That's not all perfect. I see that one of my brothers here is suffering and is killing himself here on the path. And I see that the community, in a sense, ignores him, and in another sense, enables him. And like, that's not all good. That's not all good. And so from the absolute perspective, everything is perfect, just as it is. But when we come down into the world, we come down into earthly practical reality, we see, oh no, this is an evolutionary world. And there's things that are movements forward, and there's things that are movements back. And so like here in my state, we've basically legalized all drugs without saying it. And we've thought we're doing it from a place of compassion. And, the byproduct of it is, and with open borders and this and that, there's a free flow of heroin and fentanyl into my little community. And it's this brutal thing. And so is it all good? No, it's not all good. It's not all good. I've had friends who've had daughters who are 14 years old and they're with a 68-year-old man and they're pregnant and they're addicted to dope, and it's heartbreaking. Is that all good? No, that is not all good. It's not all good. And so, Val, you're pointing out this complexity that we have here on the spiritual path, where from an absolute perspective, we're all divine beings. Everything is perfect just as it is. But God created this multi-dimensional, very complex world called planet Earth, where there's all kinds of ways where we get lost in addictions and struggles, and we get veiled by things, or we get tricked by people, and it's horrific. Like when I see my friends, God, this poor little girl, she used to hang out at my house. It says it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. She used to hang out at my house, and It's just heartbreaking to see, a child get addicted to heroin and meth and fentanyl and become impregnated by some old man and break her spirit. And, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so we have to be careful, because sometimes we have these spiritual teachings that are really dismissive and they don't honor the complexity of spiritual life. And so one of the spiritual empowerments is the empowerment of discernment. Discernment. And so when we're on the mountaintop, it's wonderful to have this vast view. When we're working with forgiveness, it's wonderful to have this vast view. It's very healing and liberating. In fact, when we have this vast view, where we realize, I'm having a really hard time, just because I'm remembering my friend's daughter, and I don't want to say her name, but, just because of, I want to honor her. But also, like, even though I've seen her, doped up, like standing in line at Walmart with this old man and having a baby in her hands, from the vast view, I can also see her divinity, and I can see that her spirit has not been broken. I see that she will outlive this thing. And I see her resilience and her beauty and her absolute divinity. But in a human way, and even just from the perspective of me being a father, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so this is one of the things here on planet Earth, is we are, again, these great angels, these beings of light. And then we have these human bodies, and we have human egos, and the ego's not all bad. It's not all wrong. Like the fatherly part of me that loves this young girl and is heartbroken about her, like, that's not wrong. That's not wrong. And so there's levels of complexity to our spirituality and to our sense of self. And, it's easy just to go on Instagram and have, some spiritual teaching. It's all God. It's all good. And it's like, that's not going to capture the totality. The totality. And so part of being awake is this invitation to be awake when we're on the mountaintop, but also to be awake to the fullness of vision when we're down in the valley. And what is it like to have a heart open and to have our highest aspects of our humanity online and able to meet life where it is, and to encourage growth in life, to encourage growth and support the growth of our brothers and sisters and fellow awakening beings on the path. And so, and I want to point this out too, and this is just like another layer of nuance here, is often you will find this, that when I ask you a question about the absolute nature of God, your ego will come forward and right away try to play the but what if game. Like but what if game. Like Yvonne brought it forward, like, but what if there's pain? Is that too God? And the absolute answer is yes. That pain too is God. That cancer too is God. Death is God. I've been visited, by the angel of death. Yeah. And that was God. That was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful when the angel of death came for a visit. It was beautiful. It's beautiful. But a cancer diagnosis, like, is this God? Yes. This too is God. But it's also God for us to respond with love, to do our healing work, to make our steps on the spiritual path. And so this very confusing world that we've incarnated into, and we need to have discernment about it. But I want us to watch out for, like, the ego tries always to play a game of logic and a game of morality or a game of righteousness when you see things that do not make sense. That do not make sense. Like from my human egoic perspective, it makes no sense that that a good friend of mine, that his 14-year-old daughter is addicted to drugs and has a child and is somehow like kind of married to a 68-year-old man. Like, like that ain't right. Like that ain't right. That ain't right from a human perspective. From a divine, absolute perspective, I see that her soul is on a journey. It's a brutal journey that it's on. And it's a journey of empowerment. And it might take her another day to wake up out of this trance. It might take her another 20 years. But she will wake up out of it. And I have total faith in her. But if I look at her today, my heart will break. My heart will break. And this is the confusing thing about being human. But again, I want us to watch out for the way our ego will put these questions, these human questions before God. We'll take human logic and say, God, this doesn't make sense. This is not fair. This is not fair, God, what you're doing. And this God that we have, who created this world, does not take orders from our ego according to what we think is fair, what we think is right. Our God has created an evolutionary world where crazy, wild, painful things happen to us, where we grow literally through facing pain. We grow literally often through being abused, through getting ourselves in tremendous trouble, through trouble coming and finding us. And so, Val, I'm glad you brought this question forward because this is one of the questions I've struggled with so greatly on the spiritual path. And this is a question that your ego will use. If we look at the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Our ego will use a question like this to lose faith in God and to maintain its authority over you. And that's not even wrong. That's just how the ego works. Like when I see bad, painful things happen to my children, or when, I hope some of you can laugh a little bit because it's kind of hilarious, but it's also tragic. Like my mountain men friends laugh at me when I tell them my guinea pigs, my daughter's guinea pigs got eaten by a bear. Like they laughed. They're like, of course they did. Of course they did, Craig. Like we have bears. You can't have animals outside. And they laugh. They're like, that was a delicious treat for the bear. Now for me, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. For my daughter, it's heartbreaking. But we live in a world where animals eat each other. I assume most of people here eat meat like we eat animals. So we live in this wild world where we grow and we're being challenged to grow through embracing our cross. Our cross. When we start to see this as a game, we become empowered. That my job is to love the people that harm me. It's like, oh, that's how I become empowered. That's how I become empowered. I become disempowered through hating the people who've harmed me. Now, there may be some developmental steps along the way there, where it may be you start with giving yourself permission to be angry. And then we grow in spiritual power and we get our voice and we speak up and we speak out, to the one who abused us. But then later on down the line, we'll be asked to eventually forgive and let go and surrender because we no longer want to carry the past within us. And we see the abuser as an aspect of our own divinity. Now that journey may take 3 months. It may take 30 years. It may take 3 months. It may take 30 years, but it's a journey of empowerment. So thank you, Val. Okay, let's read a little bit more. And I know I'm already over on the time. David Morris writes, my humanity feels like a thing that is burning up from the inside with the bonfire in my central channel. Yeah, yeah. And so you might feel that on the retreat. You might feel a lot of fire and a lot of heat. And there might be aspects of your humanity that even scream or try to hold on, to their sense of self and to their solidity. And you might find it burning up on retreat. Elena writes, I'm an aspect of divinity and emanation. I am not God. I've had experiences that make it easy-ish to believe that everything is possible. I like that word, easy-ish. Yeah, yeah. And that's the journey on the path. That's the journey. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. And David took a picture of his notebook. I love it. I love it. Thank you, David, for sharing that. Jennifer writes, I was raised a Catholic and I've always been afraid of what Jesus and the saints faced because of their faith. I have felt the need to hide my faith from fear. Yeah, fear of like what might happen. Yeah, yeah. And that's something that a lot of folks do. They're like, okay, if I open to my highest nature, will I be challenged? Yes. Yes, of course you'll be challenged. If you hide for a long period of time, from God, well, God will find a way to come and find you and really challenge you. Sometimes, I find people hiding on the spiritual path and God comes and floods their house. It's like, huh, okay, look at that. Or God brings them a toxic relationship or whatever. But again, keep in mind, God uses things to scare us in order to bring out our fearless, indestructible nature. But God is also always showering us with grace, and we can plug into this grace and we can hold on to this grace like a lifeline. And when we walk the path in this way, we don't need to be challenged so hard. So sometimes God is looking out more for the ones who are hiding. God comes to challenge them, And so like that happened with me with my first marriage. I told you I was hiding on the mountaintop with my spiritual teacher and kind of bearing away my, this part of me that was interested in relationship. And God, found a girl who would just chase me down and not take no for an answer. And so eventually God brought me out into the world. And it was a great gift, but my God was a painful thing, but it was a great gift. Okay. John writes, having a very traumatic childhood and experiencing extreme poverty, voicelessness, violence, disasters, helplessness growing up, what saved me to continue living with faith, hope, and love is the experience of God's love. His unconditional love made everything in my life possible. All things are possible with God. All things are possible with love. My reliance in God's divinity has saved my life. However, in moments that I chose my egoic self against his will, I always feel that he finds ways to get me back to him. Yeah, how beautiful is that? How beautiful is that? Yeah. Justina and baby Lawrence, right? Thank you, Craig, for talking about both the absolute and human perspective and how they both are real and important. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a cornerstone of this teaching. Cornerstone of this teaching. Okay. Let's hear from Terry. Terry's courageous enough to raise her hand.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the retreat. I feel like I'm 100% God and 100% ego.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that on this journey, like when I was a teenager, I knew my heart just knew everything already.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was here to teach. And my ego said, that is ridiculous. You're a teenager.
Yeah.
You don't know anything.
Yeah.
You're just speaking from your ego.
Yeah.
But my ego tried to make me think
Yeah. Yeah.
that that was from my ego.
Yeah.
And so I suppressed myself for like 4 decades at least
Yeah.
and tortured myself. And so that's what God did to make me wake up,
Yeah.
made me miserable. For
Yeah.
all that time, I was miserable. And so even that ego was a divine gift,
Yeah.
and it still tortures me sometimes. And it is trying to make me wake up.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for sharing yourself with us. Beautiful, my dear. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So, we're going to end here in just a moment, but again, I'm really going to invite us, to sit with this question. Do I have faith that this is God's world? Do I see God everywhere? And how are the ways, like, what are the ways that I have faith in this? What are the ways I don't have faith in this? And what's important in these first, beginning days of the retreat is really look at the ways that our ego and its power games and power struggles and our defeats and our failures have created a veil between us and God, between us and life. And so we'll sit with this question. And I invite you to, spend this time on the breaks in silence and to be with yourself, to be with your experience, and to really ask him, like, who is it that I am? Am I this divine being? Or am I this ego? Am I this ego? And for some of us who are waking up, we start to see, like what Terry sees is, it's all God. Blair sees, it's all God. It's all God. Even the ego is God. But then, like Val was speaking about, there's layers to it, and there's nuance, and there's complexity. And that's what makes life here on planet Earth and this spiritual path quite a journey, quite a game, quite an adventure. In heaven, we can just rest in it's all God. We can rest there with ease. But here with life on planet Earth, we'll be challenged. We'll be challenged. Like sometimes with me, we'll be challenged with a wild animal, or a house full of girls who are always beating me up, or difficulties with my health or whatever it is, and so, each of us has our struggles. And so I'm going to cut you all loose, and then we'll meet back here in a couple hours. Okay. And if anyone needs to schedule, the details are on the website. And I believe we meet again in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And so, yeah, have a little break and see y'all soon. Okay. Much love. Bye for now.